Don Quixote is the 1934 ComiColor cartoon. This is directed by Iwerks, Shamus Culhane, and Eugster, written by Otto Englander. Ben Hardaway and George Manuel, based, of course, on the novel. And I have read the novel, but I still wasn't sure what to expect from this because the novel's pretty large and this is an 8-minute cartoon. And before I watched it, I read the description on IMDb, which describes it as a comically, ridiculously altered version of the classic tale, which I think is a pretty accurate description, actually. Because I haven't read the novel, I can't exactly compare it. I'm aware of the story, I know what it's about, but I can't exactly compare it directly. But what I will say is that that's a pretty accurate description, and it doesn't really feel like an adaptation of Don Quixote. I feel like they're just using that story and that name to push this cartoon. It is otherwise about, our protagonist, Don Quixote, who goes around battling imaginary villains. And I'll give an example of a bit that I actually rather like, but it does have that kind of childlike quality of seeing ordinary things and imagining them as evil characters that need to be defeated. And he's a perfectly likable character in this particular cartoon. It starts off with him reading a book and then getting this idea and fight these characters, and off he goes on this adventure, and it's absolutely fine. It's not too bad at all. I wouldn't say I disliked it, but I also don't feel like it's necessarily Don Quixote. Now, again, as I said, that's me basing it off of my knowledge. I haven't read the novel, so maybe it's more like the novel than I feel it is. But nevertheless, they use the name Don Quixote, and it's certainly an interesting version of this character. It's very well animated, and there are some bits that I kind of enjoyed. For example, one of my favourite bits, and this is where I feel like it's got that kind of childlike energy, is where he sees a digger and he imagines it's a dragon, and we get to see that transition in the animation. I thought that was really effective, and there are a few other things like that. So it's very well done. As an animation on its own, it's pretty good. As a version of Don Quixote, based on my own knowledge, I would imagine it's not very accurate. But if you have read the novel, and if you recommend it, please feel free to let me know. I've always considered reading it, but never got round to it. Maybe I will. But if you've got any thoughts on that, please feel free to let me know. But as the description says, it is comically, ridiculously altered. And it does just feel like they were using the name based purely on my limited knowledge. Judging it on its own, though, as a cartoon, it's a story about a character who reads a book about these knights and fighting, and he decides he wants to have an adventure like that of his own. So off he goes and fights with ordinary things around him, imagining that they are dragons and such like. It's okay. The animation is quite appealing. The pacing is pretty good as well, and our protagonist is quite likable. So in general, Don Quixote is not a bad ComiColor, and generally pretty creative.